The wind carried the smell of burnt film and wet dust. Ethan crouched in what used to be his studio, now only broken glass, shattered frames, and a silence that weighed heavier than smoke. He brushed away a layer of ash from the floor and saw it, a photograph lying face down. He picked it up, shaking fingers tracing the edge of the paper, half burned. The photo showed a woman standing in a field of white flowers, sunlight falling like quiet rain. And beside her, a man, himself. But he never took that photo. He never stood in that place. He never met her again. A sharp pain pierced behind his eyes, fragments of memory flickering laughter, a voice, the sound of a shudder. One day, you'll understand why. The words echoed faintly, as if carried through time. He fell to his knees, clutching the photo, and for the first time in years, he whispered her name. Emma. The photograph lay on his bedside table, sealed in a transparent plastic bag. The nurse said they found it clutched in his hand when they pulled him out of the wreckage. Ethan's head throbbed whenever he tried to remember what happened before the accident. Flashes came in pieces, a road glimmering with rain, headlights slicing through the fog, and a voice whispering something that made him ache. Promise me, if one day you forget, take another picture of the same sky. He didn't know whose voice that was. He didn't even know why the name Emma made his chest tighten like a wound reopening. The doctor called it retrograde amnesia, memory lost from trauma. But when he looked at that half-burned photograph, he didn't see an injury. He saw a story trying to come back to life. That night, he dreamed again. The same woman, standing in white flowers. The same sunlit field. But this time, she turned around and smiled directly at him. And he heard himself say, in the dream, "Wait for me, until I find the rest of you." He woke up with tears on his face, and the faint scent of jasmine in the air, the same scent clinging to the photograph. The air smelled of lavender and rain when I first met him. He was standing in the middle of the square, camera hanging from his neck, the kind of quiet man who looked like he could listen to silence. "Are you the photographer?" I asked. He nodded, barely lifting his eyes. "Depends who's asking." "I'm Emma," I said. "And I need you to take a photograph that doesn't exist yet." He frowned slightly, as if the sentence bent the rules of the world he knew. "Still," he agreed. We drove for hours until the city faded into wild fields, where white flowers swayed like small waves. I wore no veil, no gown, just a simple white dress. He lifted the camera, sunlight reflecting on the lens like a promise. "Ready?" he asked. I smiled. "Not for the picture. For what comes after?" The shutter clicked, one soft sound, one stolen heartbeat. That night, I sat alone, developing the photograph under the dim red light of my small studio. The image slowly bloomed on the paper, me in the field, under a sky that looked like the beginning of forever. But something was missing. The other half of the frame, empty space beside me, felt wrong. It was meant for someone. So I wrote a note on the back of the photo, before sealing it in an envelope. "One day this picture will be complete." The hospital discharged him after 3 weeks. He returned to what used to be his studio, rebuilt walls, new paint, but the same hollow air. The photograph still haunted him, whispering in the silence of every night. On a quiet morning, he finally turned it over. There, faint but clear, written in soft cursive. "One day, this picture will be complete." The handwriting was delicate, almost trembling, as if written by someone trying to hold on. He scanned the note, enlarged it, and searched the name Emma in his old email archives, contracts, and clients. No results, except one folder, marked only with a date, July 18th, Field Project. Inside were half-finished contact sheets, and a short message from his assistant. "Met the girl you mentioned. She asked to pay in cash. Said the picture was for someone she lost." Ethan's pulse slowed. He searched deeper, until he found a receipt with an address scribbled in the corner. Blue Valley, Old Cottage, 23 Willow Road. He stared at it for a long time. Something inside him, something small, fragile, and unnamed, began to stir. That afternoon, he packed his camera again for the first time in years, not as a photographer, but as a man trying to finish a story he didn't remember starting. As he drove away from the city, the sunlight flickered between the trees like frames of an unfinished film. And somewhere, In that fading light, he could almost hear her voice. If one day you forget, take another picture of the same sky. The road to Blue Valley was narrow, carved between endless rows of pines. Mist hung low over the hills, softening everything, even the sound of his own heart. When Ethan arrived, the air smelled of rain and old wood. The town was small, almost too quiet, like a place that had forgotten how to exist. A wooden sign creaked by the roadside. Welcome to Blue Valley, population 300. He parked near an old general store, where a small brass bell rang as he entered. Behind the counter, an elderly woman looked up from her book. Her eyes, gray and gentle, lingered on his camera. You're not from here, she said. Ethan nodded. I'm looking for someone. Emma. The woman paused. For a moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. Then she slowly closed her book. You mean Emma Lark? He didn't know her last name, but he nodded anyway. The woman exhaled. She used to rent the cottage down Willow Road, number 23. Hasn't been anyone there for years. He hesitated. Do you know what happened to her? The woman's eyes softened, but her voice trembled. She was lovely. Always carried her camera. Said she was waiting for someone to come back. Ethan's breath caught. The woman turned, reached under the counter, and pulled out a small metal tin. She left this here, she said, placing it on the counter. Said the person she was waiting for would know what to do with it. Inside the tin was a film canister, labeled in faded ink. Field, July 8. Don't develop until he remembers. Ethan's hands shook as he lifted it. The tin smelled faintly of jasmine. Outside, the wind brushed through the pine trees, sounding almost like a whisper, or a name, carried by time. He rented a small room above the general store, the kind that smelled of pine dust and old rain. The tin lay on the desk like a secret breathing in the dark. Ethan waited until midnight to open it. Inside one roll of 35mm film, wrapped in fading paper and bound with a thin white ribbon. His hands trembled as he loaded it into the old developing tank he borrowed from the store. Each turn of the reel felt like turning a page in someone else's life. When the image began to appear, he froze. The photograph was taken in the same field, white flowers, soft horizon, but this time, Emma wasn't alone. A silhouette stood beside her, facing the same direction, his hand almost brushing hers. Himself? He stumbled back, the room spinning. That can't be. He never remembered standing there. But as the picture cleared, he saw something else. In the lower corner, faint words etched by hand. For when he finds the rest of the story. He sat there, shaking, until dawn. Then he noticed something small, taped to the bottom of the tin. A cassette tape, labeled, to Ethan, play me when the photograph breathes. He found an old tape recorder in the shop, pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by a soft breath, then her voice. Ethan, if you're hearing this, it means you remembered enough to finish what we started. That day in the field, you said every photo captures a fragment of truth. So I asked for a lie, a photo of the future. You told me lies could be beautiful too. If you're still looking for me, follow the light at the end of Willow Road. The sky always remembers before we do. The tape clicked off. Outside, dawn was breaking. And in that pale light, Ethan finally realized, the photograph wasn't just remembering her. It was remembering them. The road narrowed until it became a path of gravel and silence. The farther Ethan walked, the quieter everything grew, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The cottage appeared through the mist, small and worn, its windows fogged with the weight of years. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and something achingly familiar. On the wooden table lay a camera, the same vintage model he used years ago. Beside it, a box tied with a faded blue ribbon. A note rested on top. To Ethan, for when the photograph breathes. His hands shook as he untied the ribbon. Inside the box was a photo album, bound in white linen. The first page showed that same field of white flowers. In each picture, Emma stood in different poses, laughing, looking away, eyes closed. And always, always, that same empty space beside her. Until the very last photo. In that one, he was there. Standing beside her, smiling, their shadows touching in the grass. The sky above them was brighter than memory. He traced her face with his fingertips. The edges of his vision blurred. It felt like touching something both alive and gone. Then he noticed something else tucked in the back pocket of the album. A small sealed envelope. Inside, a letter. Her handwriting, fragile but steady. Ethan, if you are reading this, it means you remembered, not everything, but enough. I wanted you to have a wedding photo, even if our vows were never spoken. Because love doesn't end when time forgets us. It only waits until one of us remembers. He sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in his hands, the sunlight slipping slowly across the floor. Outside, the sky began to change. The same color as that day in the field. He lifted his camera, took one final photograph. Through the lens, he could almost see her standing there again, smiling like the world was still whole. And when he pressed the shutter, it felt like goodbye and forever at once. The dark room smelled of chemicals and rain. Ethan stood over the sink, watching the last photograph come to life in the developer tray. He had been here before, years ago, when the world still felt like it could be held in his hands. Now it was trembling again. The image formed slowly. First, the field, endless white flowers under a quiet sky. Then, two figures. Himself, holding the camera, and Emma, turning slightly toward him, her hand lifted as if to touch his face. Only this time, her eyes seemed to move. He blinked. The surface of the photo shimmered faintly, the light bending like breath against glass. For a moment, it almost felt alive. He leaned closer, whispering her name, Emma. The sound trembled through the room. And then her voice, soft and distant, echoed back. You found it. He froze. The air grew lighter, warmer, as if someone had opened a window to another season. It's not about remembering everything, her voice continued. It's about seeing what never left. Tears blurred his vision. He reached out to touch the photo, and his fingers met warmth, the faintest trace of skin through time. The light in the tray flickered once, and the image settled. Both of them standing together, the sky above them, a color no camera could ever keep. He let out a shaky breath. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It was full. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, and for a heartbeat, he swore he saw her reflection in the window, smiling. He whispered, "Thank you for waiting." And in the stillness, the photograph seemed to answer, not with words, but with light. 3 years later, the gallery was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop in the heart of the city. It smelled faintly of pine and film, like a memory kept alive. Ethan stood near the entrance, quietly watching people move from frame to frame. Each photograph on the wall carried a fragment of light, weddings, faces, landscapes. But every story ended with the same title tag, "The photograph we never took." A young woman stopped beside him. "Are you the photographer?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I guess I am." Her eyes lingered on the last photo. A field of white flowers, two silhouettes standing under a vast sky. The light in it seemed to move, almost imperceptibly, as if the photo was still breathing. "It feels alive," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "It is." He didn't explain further. Some stories didn't need explaining. They just needed to be seen. When the gallery closed, he stayed behind. The city lights outside flickered like old film. He sat by the window, holding his camera, not to capture, but to remember. He whispered, "Emma, we finally took it." A soft wind brushed through the open door, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine. The photograph on the wall caught the light, and for a heartbeat, her reflection appeared beside his in the glass, smiling the way she always did, as if nothing had ever been lost.